You really thought I wouldn't come." The words hung in the air as every conversation in that backyard stopped. I watched my ex-husband's face drain of color while his pregnant wife clutched his arm like her life depended on it. The same man who'd thrown divorce papers at me 2 years ago, telling me I was defective goods because I couldn't give him children, now stood frozen as 4 toddlers tumbled out of a white Lamborghini behind me. You know what they say about karma? She doesn't just come back, she comes back in style. And sometimes she brings reinforcements. My name is Naomi Blackwell now, though for 8 years I was Naomi Peterson, desperately trying to be the perfect wife to a man who saw me as nothing more than a broken incubator. This is the story of how I went from begging doctors to fix my broken body to watching my ex-husband's world crumble as my 4 children, each carrying the last name Blackwell, ran toward the swing set at his precious baby shower. But before you hear about today's beautiful destruction, I need you to understand something. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever had someone make you feel worthless, if you've ever been discarded like yesterday's trash, this story is for you. Because sometimes the universe has a plan so perfect, so beautifully devastating, that it takes your breath away. Hit that like button if you believe in cosmic justice. And make sure you're subscribed because this story is going to take you on a ride you won't forget. But let me start from the beginning, back when I was 24 and stupid enough to believe that love conquered all. I met Derek Peterson at my cousin's wedding in 2019. I was the maid of honor. He was the best man, and we had that classic movie meet cute over a spilled glass of champagne. He was everything I thought I wanted: stable job in finance, owned his own house, talked about wanting a big family someday. He seemed like the answer to prayers I didn't even know I was praying. For our first 2 years together, I was living in a fairy tale. Derek was attentive, romantic, always talking about our future. He'd point out baby clothes in stores and say things like, "Our kids are going to be so beautiful," or "I can't wait to be a dad." He made me feel like I was the missing piece in his perfect life puzzle. We got married on a beach in Mexico with both our families there. I remember standing in that white dress, looking into his eyes as he promised to love me, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. I believed every word. I thought I'd found my person, my forever. The problem started about 6 months after our honeymoon. We'd been trying to get pregnant, and when it didn't happen right away, Derek started making comments. Little things at first, asking if I was tracking my cycle correctly, suggesting I needed to eat healthier, exercise more. When I hit my period each month, I'd see this flash of disappointment in his eyes that he tried to hide behind concerned husband smiles. By our 2nd year of marriage, the trying had become mechanical, scheduled, joyless. Derek bought ovulation kits, tracked everything on apps, turned our bedroom into a fertility lab. The man who used to kiss me good morning now just asked if it was the right time when he looked at me. Then came the doctor appointments. Month after month of tests, procedures, consultations. My body was poked, prodded, analyzed, and measured. Every test came back normal, but Derek insisted we keep looking for what was wrong with me. Because in his mind, there had to be something wrong with me. The possibility that fertility issues might be on his side never entered his vocabulary. I started taking fertility medications that made me sick, mood swings that Derek had no patience for. When I'd cry from the hormones, he'd snap at me about being too emotional, and how stress was probably why I couldn't get pregnant. He started working late more often, going out with friends, leaving me home alone with pregnancy forums and fertility apps. The worst part was watching him around other people's children. He'd light up with his nieces and nephews, posting pictures on social media with captions like, "Can't wait for my own little ones." His mother started making comments about how she was still waiting for grandchildren, while looking directly at me during family dinners. By year 3 of our marriage, Derek had stopped pretending to be patient. He'd make jokes about my biological clock in front of our friends. He started talking about my fertility struggles to people without my permission, painting himself as the long-suffering husband dealing with a defective wife. I became the problem he had to solve, the burden he carried. Then one night in November 2023, everything changed. I was in our bedroom, injecting myself with another round of fertility hormones, when Derek walked in and just stood there watching me. His face held this look I'd never seen before. Not frustration or disappointment, but something closer to disgust. "You know what, Naomi?" he said, sitting on the edge of our bed. "I think we need to talk about other options." I thought he meant adoption, or maybe surrogacy. I was so desperate to save our marriage that I was ready to agree to anything. "I've been thinking," he continued, "maybe we should take a break from all this trying. Maybe we should take a break from each other." The hormone injection fell from my hand onto the floor. The words, "take a break from each other," hit me like I'd been slapped. I stared at Derek, waiting for him to explain what he meant, hoping desperately that I'd misunderstood. "What are you saying?" I whispered, still kneeling on our bedroom floor next to the dropped syringe. Derek ran his hands through his hair. That gesture he did when he was stressed about work, except this time the stress was me. "I'm saying maybe we rushed into this whole baby thing. Maybe we need to figure out if we're even compatible long-term before we bring a child into this mess." This mess. 3 years of marriage. And suddenly we were a mess. "Derek, we've been together for 5 years. We're married. How much more compatible do we need to be?" He stood up and started pacing, avoiding my eyes. That's just it, Naomi. I feel like all we do anymore is focus on getting pregnant. When's the last time we just enjoyed each other? When's the last time we had fun? I wanted to remind him that he was the one who turned our relationship into a fertility clinic. He was the one tracking my cycles, scheduling our intimacy, making doctor appointments. But something in his tone told me this conversation was heading somewhere I wasn't prepared for. We can have fun again, I said, standing up. We can take a vacation, go back to date nights, do whatever you want. But taking a break from each other? Derek, that sounds like you want to separate. Maybe I do. The room went completely silent except for the sound of my heart breaking. I'd known things were strained, but I thought we were working through it together. I thought the fertility struggle was something happening to us, not something he blamed me for. Is this about the pregnancy? I asked. Because the doctors said there's still hope. We could try IVF or... Naomi, stop. Derek finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. This isn't just about getting pregnant anymore. This is about who we've become. I feel like I'm married to someone whose only identity is trying to have a baby. Because you made it my only identity. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. You're the one who bought the ovulation kits. You're the one who scheduled everything. You're the one who made me feel like a failure every month. I never said you were a failure. You didn't have to say it. I could see it in your face every time I got my period. I could hear it in your voice when you talked to your friends about how hard this was for you. Like I was some kind of defective appliance you were stuck with. Derek's jaw tightened. That's not fair, and you know it. I've been nothing but supportive through this whole process. Supportive. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Derek, you stopped touching me unless it was ovulation week. You stopped asking about my day unless it involved doctor appointments. You turned me into a project you were trying to fix. Maybe because that's all you became. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and I watched him realize he'd said the quiet part out loud. I mean, no, don't take it back. That's what you really think, isn't it? That I became broken, and you got tired of dealing with it. We stared at each other across our bedroom, and I felt the foundation of everything I'd believed about our marriage cracking beneath my feet. This wasn't about taking a break from trying to conceive. This was about Derek being done with me. I think, Derek said carefully, we both need some space to figure out what we really want. I know what I want. I want my husband back. I want the man who used to hold me when I cried, who used to tell me everything would work out, who used to make me feel like I was enough just as I am. Maybe that's the problem, Naomi. Maybe you were enough for who I was then, but I've grown. I've changed. And maybe we're just not compatible anymore. The cruelty of it took my breath away. He was essentially telling me that his growth meant outgrowing me, like I was some phase he'd moved past. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? I'm saying I want some time apart to think about whether this marriage is what either of us really wants anymore. I sat down on our bed, trying to process what was happening. Where am I supposed to go? This is our house. Actually, Derek said, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. It's my house. I bought it before we got married, remember? But I'm not going to kick you out or anything. We can figure out the logistics. The logistics. He was already talking about our separation, like a business transaction. How long have you been thinking about this? I asked quietly. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, since the last IVF consultation when the doctor said we might need to consider more aggressive treatments. I just kept thinking about whether I wanted to go through all that, and whether I wanted to go through it with you. Whether he wanted to go through it with me. Not whether we could handle it together, but whether I was worth the effort. Have you talked to anyone about this? Another pause. I've mentioned some of our issues to my brother, and my mom's been asking questions about why we don't have kids yet, so I've had to explain some things. My stomach dropped. You've been discussing our private medical situation with your family? They're concerned about me, Naomi. They can see how stressed I've been. Stressed? Derek, I'm the one getting injected with hormones. I'm the one having procedures. I'm the one whose body is being treated like a science experiment. You're stressed. Do you think this has been easy for me? Watching you fall apart every month? Dealing with your mood swings? Having my family ask me constantly when we're going to have kids, and not knowing what to tell them. You could tell them it's none of their business. Or you could get help and figure out why your body won't do what it's supposed to do. The words hung between us like a poison cloud. Derek's face immediately showed regret, but it was too late. He'd finally said what he'd been thinking all along. That my infertility was a personal failing, something I could fix if I just tried harder. My body won't do what it's supposed to do, I repeated slowly. Is that really what you think? Naomi, I didn't mean. No, you meant it. That's exactly what you meant. I stood up, feeling something shift inside me. You think there's something wrong with me. You think I'm defective. I think we've been fighting biology for 3 years, and maybe it's time to accept that some things aren't meant to be. Some things like our marriage. Derek looked at me with those same eyes that used to look at me like I hung the moon. Except now they held nothing but exhaustion. Maybe. That night, Derek slept in the guest room to give us both space to think. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how I'd gone from being the love of his life to being a problem he needed space from. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen making coffee. 1 cup. I think I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while, he said without looking at me. Just until we figure things out. How long is a while? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe longer. I watched him pour coffee into his travel mug. The one I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago with "World's Best Future Dad" written on it. The irony was devastating. Derek, can I ask you something? He nodded, still not making eye contact. If I could get pregnant tomorrow, would you still want this break? For the first time in months, Derek looked directly at me. And in that moment, I saw the truth he'd been hiding. If I could give him a baby, none of our other problems would matter. If I could be the mother to his children, he'd put up with anything else. But since I couldn't do the one thing he'd married me for, everything else about me had become insufficient. I don't know, he said quietly, but I knew. And for the first time in 3 years, I was grateful I couldn't give this man a child. Derek moved out on a Tuesday. He took his clothes, his electronics, and his coffee maker, leaving behind 3 years of marriage like it was a rental property he'd decided not to renew. For the first week, I convinced myself this was temporary. He needed space, he was processing, he'd come back once he realized what he was throwing away. I deep cleaned the house, cooked his favorite meals and froze them for when he returned. Even bought new sheets for our bed, because I thought maybe a fresh start was what we needed. He called on day 8. How are you holding up? He asked, and for a second, his voice held that gentle tone I remembered from when we first met. I miss you, I said, gripping the phone like a lifeline. The house feels so empty without you. I miss you too, he said, and my heart lifted. But Naomi, I think this space is good for us. I'm sleeping better, thinking clearer. I think you should consider what this time apart is showing you too. What it was showing me was that I couldn't function without him. I'd built my entire adult identity around being Derek's wife, Derek's future baby mama, Derek's other half. Without him, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. About taking a break from trying to get pregnant. Maybe you're right. Maybe we got so focused on having a baby that we forgot how to just be married. Yeah, Derek said, but something in his voice sounded distant. Maybe we did. So when are you coming home? We could start over, do things differently. There was a long pause. Naomi, I don't think I'm ready to come home yet. How much more time do you need? I don't know. I'm still figuring things out. What things? Derek, we've been married for 3 years. What is there to figure out? Another pause. Whether this marriage is something I want to keep fighting for. The words hit me like a physical blow. Fighting for? Is that what I am to you now? Something you have to fight for instead of something you want. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant that maybe we've been trying so hard to make this work that we haven't stopped to ask if it should work. I felt something inside me starting to panic. Derek, I love you. You love me. That's enough. Everything else we can figure out. Is it enough though? Because I've been thinking about what love is supposed to feel like, and I'm not sure what we have qualifies anymore. What we have qualifies. Derek, we made vows to each other. In sickness and in health, for better or worse. This is the worst part. This is when we're supposed to fight harder, not give up. Maybe, Derek said quietly, but I'm tired of fighting. That phone call lasted 2 hours, with me begging and bargaining and promising to be different, better, easier. Derek listened with what felt like patience, but was probably just politeness. By the end, I'd agreed to give him more time, more space, whatever he needed. 3 weeks into our separation, Derek's mom called me. Naomi, honey, I wanted to check on you. Derek told us about your temporary separation. Temporary. At least that's what he was calling it. I'm okay, Mrs. Peterson. Just giving Derek the space he needs to work through things. Well, I want you to know that Michael and I are praying for you both. Marriage is hard work, especially when you're dealing with fertility challenges. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. That means a lot. Derek mentioned you might be taking a break from trying for a baby. That's probably wise. Sometimes when we want something too badly, we push it away. Did he say anything else about our situation? There was a pause. Just that you're both doing some soul searching about what you want your future to look like. After I hung up, I realized Derek was managing the narrative. To his family, this was a mutual decision, a healthy break where we were both figuring things out. He wasn't the husband who'd abandoned his wife during a medical crisis. He was the reasonable man taking space to make sure he was making the right decisions. The phone calls became less frequent. Derek would check in every few days, asking how I was doing, but sharing nothing about what he was doing or feeling. When I asked about coming home, he'd say he wasn't ready. When I asked what he needed to be ready, he'd say he didn't know. 2 months into our separation, I got a call from our insurance company about a claim Derek had submitted for a consultation with a urologist. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, I told the representative. My husband hasn't seen a urologist. According to our records, Derek Peterson had a consultation with Dr. Williams on March 15th for a fertility evaluation. My hands started shaking. Can you tell me what kind of evaluation? I can't give you specific medical details, but I can confirm the appointment was for male factor infertility testing. Derek had gone to a fertility doctor. While telling me he needed space from our fertility journey, while making me feel like I was the one with the problem, he'd been getting his own fertility tested. I called him immediately. Why didn't you tell me you went to see a fertility doctor? Naomi, how did you find out about that? The insurance company called. Derek, why would you get tested without telling me? Because I wanted to know for myself before I told you anything. Know what? Derek was quiet for a long moment. The results showed some issues on my end. Low sperm count, motility problems. Stuff that would make it really hard for us to conceive naturally. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. How long have you known this? About 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Derek, this changes everything. This means it's not my fault. This means all those years of making me feel defective, all those comments about my body not working right, all of it was. Naomi, it doesn't change anything. What do you mean it doesn't change anything? Of course it changes everything. We could do IVF with your sperm, or look into other options, or... No, we couldn't. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. What do you mean we couldn't? I mean I don't want to do IVF. I don't want to go through fertility treatments. I don't want to keep trying to force something that clearly isn't meant to happen. But now we know why it wasn't happening. We can fix this. I don't want to fix it, Naomi. I want to accept it. Accept what? That we'll never have children. Accept that maybe we're not supposed to have children together. The word together hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Derek, what aren't you telling me? Silence. Derek, I've been seeing someone. The words hit me like a truck. I actually dropped the phone and had to scramble to pick it up. You've been what? It's not serious. It just happened. But it's made me realize that what we have isn't working anymore. You've been cheating on me? We're separated, Naomi. I wouldn't call it cheating. We're separated because you said you needed space to think about our marriage. Not because you wanted to date other people. I know how this sounds, but meeting someone else has shown me what I'm missing in our relationship. What we've been missing. I felt like I was drowning. What's her name? That's not important. It's important to me. What's her name? Her name is Jennifer. She works at my company. Jennifer. He'd been working late all those months, and I thought it was because he was stressed about our fertility issues. But he'd been building a relationship with someone else. How long have you been seeing her? It started a few weeks before I moved out. A few weeks before? Derek, you asked for a separation so you could be with someone else. No, that's not how it happened. Jennifer and I were just friends, but talking to her made me realize how unhappy I'd become in our marriage. Unhappy because I couldn't get pregnant. Unhappy because we'd stopped being partners and become two people obsessed with the same impossible goal. And Jennifer doesn't want children? Derek was quiet for too long. Derek, does Jennifer want children? She already has children. 2 kids from her previous marriage. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Derek didn't want to go through fertility treatments with me, but he was perfectly willing to date a woman who came with ready-made children. So you get to be a dad after all, I said quietly. Naomi, it's not about that. It's exactly about that. You didn't want to go through the work of having children with me, but you'll take on someone else's children. You didn't want to fix our fertility problems, but you'll date someone whose fertility was never a question. That's not fair. Fair. Derek, you let me blame myself for 3 years. You made me feel like my body was broken, like I was the problem, like I wasn't woman enough to give you what you wanted. And the whole time, it was your fertility that was the issue. But instead of working through it with me, you found someone else who could give you the instant family you wanted without any of the work. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You used our fertility problems as an excuse to leave me for someone more convenient. Naomi, I think we should talk about moving forward with making this separation permanent. The word permanent echoed in my head. You want a divorce. I think it's what's best for both of us. Best for both of us, or best for you and Jennifer? I want you to be happy, Naomi. And I don't think you can be happy with me anymore. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. I can't stay in a marriage that isn't working just because you're afraid to let go. 3 days later, divorce papers were delivered to my door. The divorce papers were 37 pages of legal language that essentially said Derek wanted everything and I deserved nothing. According to his lawyer, our house was Derek's separate property since he'd bought it before marriage. Our joint savings account was mostly Derek's contributions since he made more money. Even my car was technically in his name because he'd gotten a better financing rate when we bought it. I stared at those papers in my empty kitchen, realizing that 8 years with Derek had left me with almost nothing to show for it except debt from fertility treatments that were apparently pointless anyway. My lawyer was a tired-looking woman named Patricia who specialized in divorce cases. I have to be honest with you, Naomi, she said during our first meeting. Since you were only married 3 years and most assets were his before marriage, you're looking at a very modest settlement. Maybe enough for a security deposit on an apartment and a few months of living expenses. What about spousal support? You're young, healthy, college-educated. The court will expect you to support yourself pretty quickly. I thought about the last 3 years I'd spent focused entirely on getting pregnant instead of building a career. I'd been working part-time at a nonprofit, making barely enough to cover my personal expenses while Derek handled the mortgage and major bills. I'd been playing house instead of building a life. How long do I have to find somewhere to live? Derek's being generous by giving you 60 days. Legally, he could probably get you out sooner since the house is his. Generous. Derek was being generous by not immediately kicking out the wife he'd abandoned. The first sign that Derek was becoming someone I didn't recognize came during our second mediation session. I'd asked if I could keep some of the furniture we'd bought together, and Derek's lawyer had responded by listing every item Derek wanted to retain, which was basically everything except my personal belongings. "I'd like to keep the dining room set," I said quietly. "We picked it out together for our first anniversary." Derek didn't even look at me. "I'm keeping all the furniture. Naomi can take her clothes and personal items." "Derek, I need somewhere to sit, something to eat on. You're keeping an entire house full of furniture. You should have thought about that before you let our marriage fall apart." Before I let our marriage fall apart. As if I'd been the one who'd given up, who'd found someone else, who'd filed for divorce. "I didn't let anything fall apart," I said, my voice rising. "You abandoned our marriage the minute you decided I was broken. I abandoned a marriage that had become nothing but doctor appointments and ovulation schedules." Derek shot back. "I abandoned a wife who had no identity outside of trying to get pregnant. Because you made that my only identity. You turned our entire relationship into a fertility project." Derek's lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the practical matters at hand." Patricia squeezed my arm gently, reminding me to stay calm. But something inside me was breaking apart. This man I'd loved, who I'd given everything to, was treating me like an obstacle to overcome rather than a person who'd shared his life. 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, Derek's cruelty took a new turn. I was at the grocery store when I ran into his mother. "Naomi," Mrs. Peterson said, pulling me into a hug that felt forced. "How are you holding up, dear?" "I'm okay," I lied. "Taking things one day at a time." Derek told us about the divorce papers. I have to say, we're all quite shocked. I felt my stomach clench. "What exactly did Derek tell you?" "Well, he said you decided you couldn't handle the fertility struggles anymore, and that you'd asked for the divorce." The grocery store seemed to tilt around me. "I asked for the divorce?" "He said you decided you wanted to start over with someone who didn't remind you of your fertility problems, that you needed a fresh start." I gripped my shopping cart to keep my hands from shaking. Derek was rewriting history, making himself the victim of my supposed breakdown instead of the husband who'd abandoned his wife for his coworker. "Mrs. Peterson, that's not what happened." "Oh, honey, you don't need to explain anything to me. Derek mentioned how hard this has been on you emotionally. He's worried about you, actually. He said you haven't been thinking clearly since the last failed treatment." Derek had told his family I was having a mental breakdown, that I was the one who couldn't handle our fertility struggles, who'd given up on our marriage, who'd asked for a divorce. In his version, he was the concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife who'd abandoned their marriage. "Mrs. Peterson, Derek is the one who filed for divorce. Derek is the one who moved out. Derek is the one who..." I stopped myself before saying cheating with Jennifer, because clearly Derek hadn't mentioned that part of the story. "Oh, sweetie, I think you might be confused about the timeline. Derek said he only filed the papers after you'd already moved out of the house." I stared at her. Derek had told his family that I'd moved out first, that I'd abandoned him. "I never moved out," I said quietly. "I'm still living in the house." Mrs. Peterson looked confused. "But Derek said you'd been staying with friends because you couldn't bear to be in the house where you'd tried so hard to get pregnant." The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, so perfectly designed to make Derek look like the reasonable party dealing with an irrational wife. He'd created an entire narrative where I was the one who'd given up, who'd run away, who'd broken our marriage apart. "Mrs. Peterson, I think there's been some miscommunication. Maybe you should talk to Derek again about what actually happened." I left my groceries in the cart and walked out of the store, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my keys in the car door. That night, I called Derek. "Why did you tell your mother I asked for the divorce?" "Naomi, I never said that. She said you told her I couldn't handle the fertility struggles and wanted a fresh start." "I told her you were having a hard time coping," which is true. "You told her I moved out first. I told her you were staying other places sometimes," which you have been. "I stayed at my sister's house for 2 nights after you served me with divorce papers. That's not the same as moving out. Look, my family was asking questions about why we're getting divorced, and I tried to explain it in a way that didn't make anyone look bad. You made me look like I had a nervous breakdown and abandoned our marriage. I made you look like someone going through a hard time, which is better than the alternative." "What alternative?" "Me telling them the truth about how obsessive and unstable you became about getting pregnant." The words hit me like a slap. "Unstable? Naomi, you were injecting yourself with hormones that made you crazy. You couldn't talk about anything except ovulation and fertility treatments. You turned our marriage into a medical procedure. I was trying to have the baby you said you wanted. I wanted a baby, not a wife who disappeared and got replaced by someone obsessed with conception schedules. So now I'm obsessive and unstable, but 3 months ago you were right there with me making those schedules. Because I was trying to support you through something that was clearly more important to you than our actual relationship. I felt like I was losing my mind. Derek was rewriting our entire history, making me the villain in a story where I'd been the one desperately trying to save our marriage. Derek, you're the one who bought the ovulation kits. You're the one who tracked my cycles. You're the one who made doctor appointments. Because you were falling apart every month when you got your period. I was trying to help you feel like we had some control. You're lying. I'm not lying, Naomi. I'm telling you how I experienced our marriage, which was watching the woman I married disappear into an obsession with something we might never have. I hung up the phone and sat in my empty house, wondering if I was actually going crazy. Had I been obsessive? Had I made fertility more important than our relationship? Had I driven Derek away with my desperation to get pregnant? 2 days later, I found out Derek and Jennifer were living together. My neighbor mentioned seeing a woman and 2 children at Derek's brother's house, where Derek had supposedly been staying. When I drove by after work, I saw Derek's car in the driveway along with a white Honda with a soccer mom bumper sticker. I sat in my car across the street, watching through the windows as Derek played with 2 kids in the living room while a blonde woman cooked dinner in the kitchen. They looked like a family. A happy, complete family. Derek had moved on so completely that he was already playing house with someone else, while I was living in an empty house waiting for divorce papers to finalize, so I could figure out how to rebuild my entire life from nothing. That's when I realized Derek's cruelty had been strategic. He'd made me feel crazy, made me doubt my own memories, made me question whether I'd been the problem all along. He'd isolated me from his family by painting me as unstable. He'd left me with no financial resources and no support system. And he'd done it all while playing the concerned husband dealing with an unhinged wife. The final insult came the following week, when Derek called to tell me about the baby shower invitation. "I wanted to give you a heads up about something," he said, his voice artificially gentle. "Jennifer is pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Pregnant? We found out last week. It's still early, but we wanted to tell our families." "How is that possible? You said you had fertility issues." "Turns out the tests were wrong. Or maybe my levels improved after I stopped being stressed about it all the time." Of course, Derek's fertility problems had magically resolved themselves the minute he left me. "Anyway," Derek continued, "we're having a baby shower next month, and Jennifer thought it would be good to invite you." I couldn't speak. "Naomi, are you there? You want to invite me to your baby shower?" Jennifer thinks it would show that we're all adults about this situation. That there's no hard feelings. No hard feelings. The man who destroyed my life, stolen my home, and rewritten our history wanted to invite me to celebrate the baby he'd conceived immediately after leaving me because I couldn't get pregnant. I don't think that's a good idea, Derek. Look, I know it might be awkward, but I think it would be good for you. Show everyone that you're moving on, that you're not bitter about how things ended. Show everyone. Derek wanted me there as proof that his version of our story was true, that I was the one who'd accepted the end of our marriage gracefully because I was mentally unstable anyway. "Derek, I'm not coming to your baby shower. I really think you should reconsider. Jennifer's already sent you an invitation. Then Jennifer can expect me to decline." "Naomi, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're letting bitterness control your decisions instead of doing what's healthy. What's healthy is me staying away from the man who destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy your life. Our marriage didn't work out. That happens to people. Our marriage didn't work out because you decided I was defective and found someone who wasn't. Our marriage didn't work out because we became incompatible. And the fact that you can't accept that is exactly why I'm worried about you." Derek was doing it again, making me sound crazy for being hurt by his betrayal. "Send me the invitation," I said quietly. "Really? Send me the invitation, Derek. I want to see it." "Great. I think this will be really good for everyone." The invitation arrived 3 days later, addressed to Naomi Peterson, in elegant script on expensive cardstock. The return address was Derek's brother's house, where Derek was apparently still pretending he lived alone. Inside, in flowing calligraphy, it read, "You're invited to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Peterson. Join Derek and Jennifer as they prepare to welcome their little miracle." Their little miracle. Derek and Jennifer were having their little miracle while I sat in an empty house, facing bankruptcy from fertility treatments that had been pointless anyway, about to be homeless because my husband had decided I was broken goods. But as I stared at that invitation, something shifted inside me. For the first time in months, I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't confused about what had happened to my marriage. I was angry. And for the first time since Derek had walked out, I started thinking about what I really wanted my life to look like. I spent 3 days staring at that baby shower invitation, reading and rereading those words, "little miracle," until they burned themselves into my brain. Derek and Jennifer's little miracle, conceived effortlessly while I'd spent 3 years believing my body was broken. On the 4th day, I decided to drive past Derek's brother's house again. I told myself I just wanted to see if Derek was actually living there or if that was another lie. But really, I think I was torturing myself. I wanted to see his new perfect life so I could feel properly sorry for myself. I parked across the street around dinner time, watching through the windows as Derek played with Jennifer's 2 kids while she cooked. It looked like a commercial for family happiness, and I felt that familiar stab of inadequacy watching him be the father he'd never been able to be with me. I was about to leave when I heard voices coming from the backyard. Derek and Jennifer had stepped outside onto the deck, and their voices carried clearly across the quiet neighborhood. "I still can't believe you actually invited her," Jennifer was saying, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. "I told you it was a stroke of genius," Derek replied. "My mom's been asking too many questions about why the marriage really ended. Having Naomi show up looking pathetic will answer all those questions without me having to say a word." I froze in my car, my hand on the keys. But what if she doesn't come? Jennifer asked. Oh, she'll come. Naomi's too pathetic not to come. She's probably been sitting in that empty house for weeks, desperate for any excuse to be around me again. Jennifer laughed. You're terrible. The poor woman. Poor woman? Jennifer, this is the same woman who turned our marriage into a fertility clinic, who made my life miserable for 3 years with her obsession with getting pregnant, who couldn't accept that some people just aren't meant to have children. Still, inviting your ex-wife to your baby shower is pretty cold, even for you. It's perfect, Derek said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Everyone will see exactly what I had to deal with. My mom, my family, all our old friends. They'll see this bitter, childless woman who couldn't handle that I moved on and found happiness. What if she causes a scene? Even better. Let her have a breakdown at our baby shower. Let everyone see how unstable she really is. It'll justify everything I've told them about why our marriage failed. I sat in my car, feeling like the ground was disappearing beneath me. Derek hadn't invited me to show there were no hard feelings. He'd invited me to humiliate me publicly, to use my pain as entertainment for his friends and family. The timing is perfect too, Derek continued. She'll be getting the final divorce papers any day now, so she'll be at her lowest point. She'll probably show up in some tragic outfit, looking desperate and pathetic, and everyone will understand exactly why I had to leave her. You are so bad, Jennifer said, but she was laughing. I'm strategic. My family needs to see what I was dealing with, so they stop making me feel guilty about the divorce. Once they see Naomi at our baby shower, looking broken and bitter while we're celebrating our miracle baby, they'll realize I made the right choice. Our miracle baby. Derek was calling Jennifer's pregnancy a miracle, while calling my infertility a personal failing. What if she brings someone? Jennifer asked. Derek actually snorted. Bring someone? Jennifer, look at her life. She has no friends, no career, no money, no prospects. She's a 30-year-old woman whose entire identity was being my wife. Who's she going to bring? They went back inside, still laughing about their plan to use me as the entertainment at their baby shower. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, letting the full scope of Derek's cruelty sink in. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just rewritten our history to make himself look better. He was actively planning to destroy what was left of my reputation and dignity by parading my pain in front of everyone we'd known as a couple. Derek wanted me at that baby shower so people could see the crazy, bitter ex-wife compared to his new perfect family. He wanted my presence to justify every lie he'd told about our marriage, every cruel comment he'd made about my fertility, every way he'd painted me as the problem. I drove home in a daze, finally understanding that the man I'd loved for 8 years was not just indifferent to my pain. He was actively enjoying it. He was using my suffering as a tool to make himself look better. That night, I called my sister Maya for the first time since the divorce papers had arrived. Naomi, I've been wondering when you were going to call me back. I know, I'm sorry. I've been dealing with a lot. How are you holding up with everything? I broke down and told her everything. The separation, the fertility test results Derek had hidden, Jennifer, the lies he'd told his family, and finally, what I'd overheard about the baby shower. Maya was quiet for a long time after I finished. Naomi, she said finally, that man is a sociopath. I think I might actually be crazy, Maya. He keeps making me feel like I imagined everything, like I was the problem, like our marriage failed because I was obsessive and unstable. You are not crazy. You are not unstable. You are a woman who is emotionally abused by a man who's now trying to publicly humiliate you for his own entertainment. But what if I was obsessive about getting pregnant? What if I did make our marriage all about fertility treatments? Naomi, listen to me. Even if you had been obsessive, even if you had made mistakes, that doesn't justify what Derek did to you. Normal people don't abandon their spouses during medical crises. Normal people don't cheat and then blame their partner. Normal people don't invite their ex-wife to a baby shower specifically to humiliate them. I started crying for the first time in weeks. And furthermore, Maya continued, Derek participated in every single fertility treatment. He was right there making those schedules, booking those appointments, tracking your cycles. He was just as invested in getting pregnant as you were. But now he's rewriting history to make you the villain. I feel so stupid for believing him when he said he loved me. You're not stupid for believing someone when they say they love you. You're not stupid for trusting your husband. You're not stupid for wanting to save your marriage. Derek is the one who lied, cheated, and manipulated. Derek is the one who should feel stupid. But Maya, I have nothing left. He's taking the house, most of our money, all the furniture. I'm going to be 31 years old, starting over with nothing. And now he wants to parade me around like some cautionary tale about bitter divorced women. Then don't let him. What do you mean? I mean, don't show up to his baby shower looking broken and desperate like he expects. Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing you destroyed. Maya, I am destroyed. No, you're hurt. There's a difference. You're hurt because someone you love turned out to be cruel. But you're not destroyed unless you let him destroy you. I don't know how to not let him destroy me. You start by remembering who you were before Derek Peterson made you believe you were worthless. You start by remembering that your value as a woman has nothing to do with whether you can give some man a baby. You start by remembering that being childless doesn't make you defective. Being divorced doesn't make you a failure. and being alone doesn't make you pathetic. I don't remember who I was before Derek. Then you figure out who you want to be after Derek. And I guarantee you, the woman you become will be stronger than the woman he threw away. After I hung up with Maya, I sat in my empty house and thought about Derek's plan. He wanted me to show up broken, desperate, and pathetic so he could use my pain to justify his betrayal. He wanted his family and friends to look at me and think, no wonder Derek left her. But for the first time since this nightmare had started, I began to wonder, what if I didn't show up the way Derek expected? What if, instead of being the tragic figure in Derek's redemption story, I became something else entirely? I looked at that baby shower invitation again, but this time I wasn't reading it as a victim. I was reading it as a woman who was about to discover exactly what she was capable of. Derek had made one crucial mistake in his plan to humiliate me publicly. He'd given me advance notice, and he'd completely underestimated who I might become once I stopped believing his lies about who I was. The final divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who looked embarrassed to be handing me documents that would officially end my marriage. I signed for them with shaking hands, then sat at my kitchen table reading through the settlement agreement that made Derek's victory complete. The house had to be vacated within 30 days. I was getting $12,000 from our joint savings, barely enough for first and last month's rent on a decent apartment. Derek was keeping the car since it was in his name, which meant I'd need to figure out transportation. Even my engagement ring had to be returned since it was a conditional gift based on marriage that was no longer applicable. I called Patricia, my lawyer, to confirm what I was reading. I'm sorry, Naomi. Derek's lawyer was very aggressive about this settlement. Since most assets were acquired before marriage, and you signed a prenup, our options were limited. I signed a prenup? The document you signed before your wedding that waived your rights to spousal property. Don't you remember? I had a vague memory of Derek bringing me a stack of papers the week before our wedding, telling me it was just insurance paperwork and wedding venue contracts. I'd been so overwhelmed with wedding planning that I'd signed everything he put in front of me without reading carefully. I thought that was insurance paperwork. I'm afraid it was a very comprehensive prenuptial agreement. Derek's lawyer probably advised him to have you sign it along with other documents, so you wouldn't realize what it was. Derek had tricked me into signing away my rights to our marital assets before we'd even gotten married. He'd been planning his exit strategy from day one. That afternoon, I started looking for apartments I could afford on my nonprofit salary. The only places in my price range were studio apartments in rough neighborhoods or shared housing situations with strangers. I was about to become a 31-year-old divorced woman, living in a studio apartment with a futon and whatever belongings Derek decided I could keep. The moving truck Derek hired arrived the following week to collect his furniture. I watched three men carry out the dining room set we'd picked out together, the couch where we'd watched movies, the bed where we'd tried so desperately to conceive a child. They left me with my clothes, my books, and a folding chair Derek had forgotten about in the garage. I spent my last night in that house sitting on the floor of what used to be our bedroom, eating takeout Chinese food and wondering how my life had become such a complete disaster. 8 years with Derek, and I was leaving with less than I'd had when I met him. But the worst was yet to come. 2 days before Derek's baby shower, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. She was glowing with that first trimester pregnancy radiance, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach as she examined prenatal vitamins. Naomi, she said when she saw me, her voice dripping with fake concern. How are you doing? Derek said you've been having a really hard time with everything. I stared at this woman who'd stolen my husband and was now carrying the baby I'd spent 3 years failing to conceive. She was younger than me, prettier than me, and apparently more fertile than me. Everything I'd failed to be. I'm fine, I managed to say. Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Derek's been so worried about you. Derek was worried about me. The man who'd engineered my complete destruction was worried about me. I hope you're still planning to come to the baby shower, Jennifer continued. I know it might be awkward, but Derek thinks it would really help you move on. Move on. Accept that Derek's happy now and stop holding on to the past. He said you've been having trouble letting go of your marriage. I felt something inside me crack. Jennifer wasn't just carrying Derek's baby. She was carrying his narrative about me. She genuinely believed I was some pathetic ex-wife who couldn't accept that Derek had moved on to someone better. Jennifer, can I ask you something? Of course. Did Derek tell you why our marriage ended? He said you became obsessed with having a baby and it put too much strain on your relationship. That you couldn't handle it when the treatments didn't work and you started blaming him for your fertility problems. Derek had told her I'd blamed him for my fertility problems, when the truth was that he'd blamed me for his fertility problems. Did he mention that he had fertility issues too? Jennifer looked confused. Derek doesn't have fertility issues. The doctor said our baby was conceived naturally, no problems at all. Derek had testing done that showed low sperm count and motility issues. I think you might be confused, Naomi. Derek and I got pregnant on our second month of trying. There's nothing wrong with Derek's fertility. I stared at her, realizing that Derek had lied to me about his test results too. There had never been any fertility issues on his side. He'd invented that story to make me feel less alone in my supposed brokenness. then used it as another reason to leave me when he found someone else. Anyway, Jennifer continued, I hope you can be happy for us. Derek deserves to have the family he's always wanted. Derek deserves to have the family he's always wanted. As if I'd been selfishly preventing him from having children instead of desperately trying to give them to him. I walked away from Jennifer without another word, leaving my groceries in the cart again. In my car, I sat shaking with a rage so pure it scared me. Derek hadn't just left me for someone else. He'd systematically destroyed my sense of reality, made me question my own memories, and convinced everyone in our social circle that I was an unstable woman who'd driven away a good man. And now he was planning to parade me in front of our friends and family as proof of how right he'd been to leave me. That night, I called Maya again. I can't do this anymore, I told her through tears. Derek has destroyed everything. My marriage, my home, my finances, my reputation. Even the woman he left me for thinks I'm the crazy ex-wife who couldn't handle that he was happy. Naomi, you need to get out of there. Come stay with me in California for a while. Get away from Derek and his poison and remember who you are. Maya, I can't afford a plane ticket to California. I can barely afford rent on a studio apartment. I'll send you a ticket. Just pack a bag and come here. You need distance from this situation before it completely destroys you. What's the point? Derek's won. He got everything he wanted, the perfect wife, the easy pregnancy, the instant family, and everyone believing I was the problem. I'm just the cautionary tale now. The point is that you're 31 years old and your life is not over. The point is that Derek Peterson is not the final word on your worth as a human being. The point is that you get to decide what happens next. I don't know what happens next. I don't know who I am without Derek. Then come to California and figure it out. Come here where no one knows Derek's version of your story and remember what it feels like to be yourself again. After I hung up with Maya, I sat in my empty house and thought about Derek's baby shower, which was happening in 2 days. He was expecting me to show up broken and desperate, ready to be humiliated for the entertainment of his friends and family. But Maya was right about one thing. Derek didn't get to be the final word on my worth. I looked around at the empty rooms that had once been my home, at the folding chair that was now my only furniture, at the suitcase I'd packed with the few possessions Derek had allowed me to keep. For 3 years, I'd let Derek convince me that my value as a woman depended on my ability to give him children. For 8 years, I'd let him define my worth based on how well I served his needs. For the past 6 months, I'd let him rewrite our history to make me the villain in his redemption story. But sitting in that empty house, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was rock bottom, or maybe it was the moment I finally stopped believing Derek's lies about who I was. I pulled out that baby shower invitation one more time, reading those words "little miracle" in Jennifer's flowing script. Derek wanted me there as his broken ex-wife, proof of what happened to women who weren't good enough to keep him. But what if I didn't show up as Derek's ex-wife at all? What if I showed up as someone completely different? I picked up my phone and called Maya back. Maya, I changed my mind about California. Really? When do you want me to book your flight? I don't want to run away from Derek's baby shower. I want to go. Naomi, I don't think that's a good idea. You heard what Derek said about wanting to humiliate you. I did hear what Derek said, and I've decided he's right about one thing. This baby shower is going to show everyone exactly who we really are. It's just not going to show what he thinks it's going to show. What do you mean? I mean, Derek has been telling everyone I'm a broken, bitter woman who couldn't handle that he found happiness. So I'm going to show up at his baby shower and prove him right. I'm confused. Derek expects me to arrive looking desperate and pathetic. He wants his family and friends to look at me and think, thank God Derek escaped from that mess. So that's exactly what I'm going to give them. Naomi, that sounds like you're planning to humiliate yourself. No, Maya. I'm planning to let Derek humiliate himself. For the first time in months, I was thinking clearly. Derek had built his entire narrative around the idea that I was unstable, bitter, and pathetic. He'd convinced everyone that leaving me was an act of self-preservation. But narratives could be rewritten. And Derek had just given me the perfect stage to do it. I spent the next morning researching Derek's baby shower, like I was planning a military operation. The party was being held at his brother Michael's house, the same house where Derek had been pretending to live alone while actually playing house with Jennifer and her kids. According to the Facebook event page Jennifer had created, 60 people were invited, including Derek's entire family, his co-workers, and most of our former mutual friends. The guest list read like a catalog of everyone who now believed Derek's version of our story. His mother, who thought I'd abandoned our marriage because I couldn't handle fertility struggles. His brother, who probably thought Derek was a saint for putting up with my obsession with getting pregnant. His co-workers, who'd watched Derek find happiness with Jennifer after escaping his unstable ex-wife. I was studying the event photos Jennifer had posted, decorations in soft pastels, elegant table settings, a dessert table that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, when my phone rang. Ms. Peterson, this is Dr. Martinez from the fertility clinic. I wanted to follow up on your recent test results. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, what test results? The comprehensive fertility panel you had done 3 weeks ago. The results came back, and I wanted to discuss some exciting findings with you. Dr. Martinez, I haven't been to your clinic in over 6 months. According to our records, you had blood work and ultrasound imaging done on March 28th. Let me check. Yes, here it is. The results show excellent ovarian reserve, perfect hormone levels, and no indicators of any fertility issues whatsoever. I felt the room start spinning. That's impossible. I've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years with no success. Ms. Peterson, based on these test results, you should have no trouble conceiving naturally. In fact, your fertility markers are exceptional for your age. I'm actually surprised you haven't conceived already. Doctor, I think there's been some mistake. Someone else must have used my name or insurance. Let me double-check the information. Social security number ending in 4829, birth date November 15th. That was me. Yes, but I didn't have any tests done. The tests were ordered by your husband, Derek Peterson. He said you were too emotional about the results to call yourself, so he wanted to handle the follow-up. Derek had ordered fertility tests for me without my knowledge, then lied about the results. Dr. Martinez, what exactly did my husband tell you about my previous test results? He said you'd been told you had unexplained infertility and that you were having a difficult time emotionally accepting the diagnosis. He wanted updated testing to see if anything had changed. And what do these new results show? They show that whoever told you that you had fertility problems was either incorrect or lying. Ms. Peterson, you're one of the most fertile women I've tested in my 20-year career. I hung up the phone and sat in my folding chair, trying to process what I just learned. Derek had secretly ordered new fertility tests for me, discovered that I'd never had fertility problems, and hidden the results while filing for divorce and getting Jennifer pregnant. Derek had known for months that my infertility was a lie. He'd known when he told me his own fertility tests showed problems. He'd known when he said he didn't want to pursue treatments. He'd known when he filed for divorce, claiming we were incompatible because of our fertility struggles. Derek had discovered that I was perfectly capable of getting pregnant, and instead of telling me, he'd used that information to justify leaving me for someone else. But why would Derek hide fertility test results that proved I wasn't broken? The answer hit me like a lightning bolt. Derek hadn't left me because I couldn't get pregnant. Derek had left me because I could get pregnant, and he didn't want to have children with me. All those years of fertility treatments, hormone injections, doctor appointments, and emotional devastation. Derek had been sabotaging our chances of conceiving while making me believe I was defective. I called Dr. Martinez back. Doctor, I need to ask you something specific about my test results. Based on my fertility markers, what are the chances I would have conceived naturally over the past 3 years if we'd been trying properly? Given your excellent fertility indicators, I'd estimate roughly 90% chance of conception within the first year of trying, assuming normal male fertility and proper timing. What would prevent conception in someone with my fertility levels? Poor timing, male factor infertility, or deliberate interference with the conception process? Deliberate interference. What kind of deliberate interference? Birth control without the partner's knowledge, sabotaging fertility timing, providing incorrect information about ovulation cycles. Unfortunately, I've seen cases where one partner secretly prevents conception while the other partner believes they're trying. Derek had been sabotaging our attempts to conceive while convincing me that I was the problem. I thought back to all those months of tracking my cycle, and how Derek had been the one managing the timing, how he'd bought the ovulation kits and interpreted the results, how he'd scheduled our intimacy around what he claimed were my fertile days. Derek had been deliberately mistiming everything while making me believe we were trying our hardest to get pregnant. For 3 years, I'd injected myself with hormones, undergone painful procedures, and blamed my body for failing to do something Derek was actively preventing from happening. And when he'd gotten tired of the charade, he'd secretly confirmed that I was perfectly fertile, then used our infertility struggles as justification for leaving me for a woman who could give him the instant family he'd actually wanted all along. I called Maya immediately. Maya, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound insane. What happened? I told her about Dr. Martinez's call, about the test results Derek had hidden, about the realization that he'd been sabotaging our conception efforts while making me believe I was broken. Maya was quiet for a long time. Naomi, she said finally, that's not just cruel. That's psychological abuse. Derek didn't just lie to you. He systematically destroyed your sense of reality while causing you physical and emotional harm. Maya, what if Derek never wanted children with me at all? What if he just liked the idea of being married, but when it came time to actually start a family, he realized he didn't want it to be with me? Then he should have been honest instead of torturing you for 3 years. But don't you see? Derek couldn't just say he didn't want children with me, because then he'd look like the bad guy. So instead he made me believe I couldn't have children, made everyone believe our marriage failed because of my fertility problems, then left me for someone who already had kids, so he could be an instant father without having to actually commit to having children with anyone. That's diabolical. It's perfect. Derek gets to be the victim of unfortunate circumstances instead of the husband who abandoned his wife because he didn't want to have children with her. He gets the family he wants without any of the work or commitment. And I get to be the broken woman whose body failed her marriage. But sitting there with this new information, I realized Derek had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I would never find out the truth. Derek was planning to parade me at his baby shower as proof of his good judgment in leaving me. He wanted everyone to see the bitter, childless ex-wife compared to his new pregnant partner and think he'd made the right choice. But Derek didn't know that I now knew the truth about everything. He didn't know that I had proof of his lies, evidence of his manipulation, documentation of his cruelty. Derek thought he was inviting his broken ex-wife to be humiliated at his baby shower. But he was actually inviting someone who could destroy his entire carefully constructed narrative with a single phone call. I looked at that baby shower invitation again, but this time I wasn't seeing it as a victim. I was seeing it as an opportunity. Derek wanted to use me as entertainment at his party? Fine. But the entertainment wasn't going to be what he expected. I picked up my phone and started making calls. Not to airlines to book flights to California. Not to apartments to find somewhere to hide. I started calling people who could help me become someone Derek would never see coming. Because Derek had taught me something valuable over the past 8 years. If you're going to destroy someone, you make sure they never see it coming. And Derek Peterson had no idea what was about to hit him. The choice was clear now. I could accept Derek's narrative about who I was, the broken, bitter ex-wife whose fertility problems had ruined her marriage. Or I could show everyone who Derek really was. I chose destruction, but not my own destruction. His. The first call I made was to Dr. Martinez, asking for copies of all my test results and medical records. The second call was to a lawyer who specialized in medical fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The third call was to my sister Maya. Maya, I need you to help me with something, and I need you to trust me completely. What do you need? I need you to help me disappear for 18 months. Disappear? Derek wants to parade me at his baby shower as the broken ex-wife who couldn't handle his happiness. But what if the woman who shows up isn't broken at all? What if she's someone he never could have imagined? Naomi, what are you planning? I'm planning to become someone Derek will wish he'd never betrayed. Maya was quiet for a moment. Okay, what do you need me to do? I need to come to California, but not to hide. I need to completely reinvent myself. I need to become successful, confident, and happy. I need to become everything Derek said I could never be without him. That sounds like a good plan for your life. But what does it have to do with a baby shower? Derek sent me an invitation to a baby shower happening 18 months from now. Naomi, Derek's baby shower is this weekend. No, Maya. Derek's first baby shower is this weekend. But I have a feeling there's going to be another celebration in his future. And when there is, I'm going to be ready. What I didn't tell Maya was that I'd already started putting pieces in place. The fertility records Dr. Martinez had given me were just the beginning. I'd also requested copies of Derek's fertility tests. The ones he'd claimed showed problems, but were actually completely normal. I'd documented every lie Derek had told his family about our divorce. I'd saved every text message where he'd tried to make me feel crazy for remembering our marriage differently than his revised version. But more importantly, I'd started planning for a future Derek couldn't imagine. I moved to California and enrolled in business school, using the small settlement from our divorce as a down payment on my education. While Derek was playing house with Jennifer, I was learning about entrepreneurship, investment, and building wealth. I started therapy to undo the psychological damage Derek had inflicted, but more importantly, to understand how I'd allowed myself to be manipulated so completely. I learned about gaslighting, emotional abuse, and how abusers systematically destroy their victims' sense of reality. I also learned that everything Derek had told me about myself was a lie. I wasn't obsessive. I was dedicated. I wasn't unstable. I was passionate. I wasn't broken. I was betrayed. I wasn't worthless. I was undervalued. 6 months into my new life, I met Marcus Blackwell at a business conference in San Francisco. Marcus was a tech entrepreneur who'd built and sold 3 companies by the age of 35. He was intelligent, kind, successful, and most importantly, he saw me as a whole person rather than a fertility vessel. When I told Marcus about my marriage to Derek, he was horrified by the psychological abuse I'd endured. When I told him about Derek's fertility sabotage, Marcus held me while I cried for the woman I'd been who'd believed she was defective. Naomi, Marcus said that night, Derek didn't leave you because you couldn't have children. Derek left you because he was terrified of who you might become if you stopped believing his lies about yourself. What do you mean? I mean, Derek kept you small and insecure because that's how he could control you. The moment you discovered your own worth, he'd lose all power over you. So he created a situation where you'd always feel like you needed him to validate your value as a woman. Marcus was right. Derek hadn't just sabotaged my fertility. He'd sabotaged my sense of self-worth. Every month I'd failed to get pregnant, I'd believed a little more that I was fundamentally flawed. Every doctor's appointment that didn't yield answers, I'd become more dependent on Derek's support and approval. Derek had been systematically destroying my confidence, so I'd never believe I deserved better than what he was giving me. But Marcus saw something in me that Derek had tried to erase potential. Within a year, Marcus and I had launched a consulting firm that helped women start businesses after major life transitions like divorce or job loss. The company was immediately successful because we were solving a real problem, helping women rebuild their lives after being torn down by circumstances or people who'd underestimated them. Marcus and I fell in love while building something meaningful together. When he proposed, it wasn't because he needed me to complete his life. It was because he wanted to share his life with someone he genuinely admired and respected. But the real miracle happened when we decided to start a family. I got pregnant on our second month of trying, exactly like Dr. Martinez had predicted I would with my excellent fertility. When the ultrasound showed we were having twins, Marcus cried with joy. When the next ultrasound revealed we were actually having quadruplets, Marcus spun me around the doctor's office laughing about how we were going to need a bigger car. 4 babies, Marcus said, kissing me. Our little soccer team. Are you sure you can handle 4 babies at once? Naomi, I can handle anything with you. You're the strongest woman I know. Marcus had seen me build a successful company from nothing. He'd watched me heal from years of psychological abuse. He'd witnessed me discover my own worth and refuse to settle for less than I deserved. To Marcus, I wasn't a woman who'd failed at her first marriage because of fertility problems. I was a woman who'd survived emotional torture and emerged stronger. When our quadruplets were born, 2 boys and 2 girls, all healthy and perfect, Marcus was the first to suggest they carry his last name. I want the world to know these children belong to our family, he said. I want everyone to know how proud I am to be their father and your husband. So Emma, James, Sophie, and Michael Blackwell came into the world as part of a family built on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared dreams. I was adjusting to life as a mother of 4 when Derek's second baby shower invitation arrived. The envelope was addressed to Naomi Peterson at my old address, but the post office had forwarded it to my new home, a sprawling house in Marin County that Marcus and I had bought to accommodate our growing family. I stared at the invitation, realizing Derek had no idea that Naomi Peterson no longer existed. The woman who'd been broken by his betrayal had been replaced by Naomi Blackwell, entrepreneur, mother, and wife to one of the most successful men in Silicon Valley. Jennifer's having another baby shower, Marcus asked, reading over my shoulder. Apparently. And Derek still thinks I'm the pathetic ex-wife who never got over him. Are you going to go? I looked at Marcus holding Sophie while James crawled around his feet, and I thought about the woman I'd been when Derek left me. That woman had believed she was worthless without a husband, broken without children, and destined to live as a cautionary tale about women who couldn't keep their men satisfied. But the woman I'd become had built a multi-million-dollar business, married a man who worshipped her, and given birth to 4 beautiful children who would grow up knowing their mother was powerful. Actually, I said, smiling at Marcus, I think I am going to go. Should I be worried about Derek trying to manipulate you again? Derek can't manipulate someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth. Besides, I think it's time Derek learned who I really became after he threw me away. Marcus grinned. Should I be worried about what you're planning to do to him? Derek spent years making me believe I was broken. He used my supposed fertility problems to justify destroying my life. He paraded my pain as entertainment for his friends and family. And now I'm going to show him exactly what he lost when he decided I wasn't worth fighting for. The baby shower was being held at the same country club where Derek and I had celebrated our anniversary 3 years ago. As I pulled into the parking lot in my white Lamborghini, a gift from Marcus when our company hit its first $1 million in revenue, I could see Derek through the window, holding court with his friends while Jennifer showed off her pregnant belly to the other women. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. Designer dress, professional makeup, confidence radiating from every pore. I looked like success, happiness, and everything Derek had convinced me I could never achieve without him. But the real surprise was in the back seat. Emma, James, Sophie, and Michael Blackwell, 18 months old and absolutely perfect, were dressed in matching outfits and ready to meet their mother's ex-husband. As I unbuckled the first car seat, I thought about Derek's plan to humiliate me at his last baby shower. He'd wanted everyone to see the broken, childless woman who'd been too damaged to keep him satisfied. But Derek had made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd assumed I would stay broken. Instead, I'd used his betrayal as fuel to become everything he'd told me I could never be. And now Derek was about to discover that the woman he'd thrown away had become the woman he'd never deserved in the first place. I lifted Sophie out of her car seat and smiled as she gurgled happily in my arms. Ready to meet Mommy's old friend? I whispered to her. He's about to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who refuses to stay defeated. As I walked toward the country club entrance with 4 beautiful children and the confidence of a woman who'd rebuilt her entire life from the ashes of Derek's cruelty, I could see guests starting to notice us through the windows. Derek's conversation stopped mid-sentence as he caught sight of me through the glass. His face went completely white as he registered what he was seeing. The infertile ex-wife he'd destroyed, walking toward his baby shower with quadruplets and radiating the kind of success he'd convinced everyone she could never achieve. The entertainment portion of Derek's baby shower was about to begin. But once again, the entertainment wasn't going to be what Derek expected. The country club fell silent as I walked through the door carrying Sophie, with Emma, James, and Michael toddling beside me in their matching outfits. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Every person who'd believed Derek's story about his broken, infertile ex-wife stared in shock at the confident woman with 4 beautiful children who'd just walked into their narrative. Derek's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. Oh my God, someone whispered. Is that Naomi? Jennifer, who'd been showing off her pregnant belly to a group of women, turned around and her face went pale. The woman Derek had described as pathetic and childless was standing in her designer dress with quadruplets who were clearly thriving and happy. Naomi, Derek said, his voice barely audible. What are you doing here? You invited me, remember? I said, my voice calm and confident. You said it would be good for me to see how happy you are now. Derek's mother approached us first, her eyes wide with confusion. Naomi, dear, whose children are these? These are my children, Mrs. Peterson. Emma, James, Sophie, and Michael Blackwell. Blackwell. Derek's voice cracked. Yes, they have their father's name. My husband's name. The word husband hit Derek like a physical blow. He'd been so certain I'd never recover from our divorce. Never find someone else. Never have the family I'd wanted so desperately. You're married? Jennifer asked, her voice high and strained. Very happily married. Marcus and I celebrated our second anniversary last month. But Derek said you couldn't have children, Mrs. Peterson said, looking confused. He said that's why your marriage ended. I smiled gently at Derek's mother, the woman who'd pitted me for years based on her son's lies. Mrs. Peterson, I think Derek might have misunderstood some medical information. As you can see, I had no trouble having children once I was with the right partner. Derek's face was cycling through emotions. Shock, panic, rage, and something that looked like recognition that his entire world was about to collapse. How old are they? Derek's brother Michael asked, doing math in his head. 18 months, I replied cheerfully. Michael's eyes widened as he calculated backwards. But that means you got pregnant almost immediately after your divorce was final. Actually, I got pregnant about 6 months after our divorce. Apparently, Derek was incorrect about my fertility issues. A murmur went through the crowd as people began to realize the implications of what I was saying. If I'd gotten pregnant easily with someone else, then Derek's story about our marriage ending due to my infertility didn't make sense. I don't understand, Jennifer said, looking between Derek and me. Derek said you had unexplained infertility, that you'd been trying for years with no success. We were trying for years with no success, I confirmed. But it turns out the problem wasn't my fertility after all. Derek's face had gone completely white. He knew where this was heading, and he was powerless to stop it. Derek, his mother said slowly, if Naomi could have children, why couldn't you two have children together? The country club was dead silent except for my babies babbling happily in their strollers. Everyone was looking at Derek, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the contradictions in his story. It's complicated, Derek said weakly. Actually, it's not complicated at all, I said, pulling out my phone. Dr. Martinez from the fertility clinic helped me understand exactly what happened. Derek's eyes went wide with panic. Naomi, don't. Don't what, Derek? Don't tell the truth? Don't share the medical records you hid from me? Don't explain to your family and friends how our marriage really ended. What medical records? Mrs. Peterson asked. I looked around the room at all the people who'd believed Derek's version of our story, who'd pitted me as the broken woman who'd driven away a good man. Derek secretly ordered fertility tests for me 3 weeks before he filed for divorce. The results showed that I have exceptional fertility, better than average for my age. The doctor said I should have had no trouble conceiving naturally. The silence in the room was deafening. But Derek never told me about those test results, I continued. Instead, he used our fertility struggles as justification for ending our marriage. I don't understand, Jennifer said, but her voice suggested she was starting to understand perfectly. Derek let me believe for 3 years that my body was broken, that I was defective, that I was the reason we couldn't have children. He watched me inject myself with hormones, undergo painful procedures, and blame myself for our fertility problems while he knew the entire time that there was nothing wrong with me. Derek's mother looked at her son with horror. Derek, is this true? It's not that simple, Derek said desperately. The situation was complicated, and the situation was that Derek didn't want to have children with me, I said calmly. But instead of being honest about that, he sabotaged our attempts to conceive while making me believe I was the problem. That's not true. Derek exploded, but his denial sounded hollow. Really? Then explain how I got pregnant with quadruplets 6 months after our divorce, Derek. Explain how a woman with unexplained infertility conceived 4 babies naturally with her new husband. The crowd was staring at Derek with growing understanding and disgust. His story had never made sense, but no one had questioned it because they'd trusted him. Now, faced with proof of his deception, people were seeing Derek for who he really was. Derek, Jennifer said quietly, you told me Naomi blamed you for her fertility problems. You said she became obsessive and unstable. Jennifer, let me explain. You told me she couldn't handle that you'd moved on and found happiness. But Derek, look at her. Does she look like someone who couldn't handle your happiness? Everyone looked at me, successful, confident, surrounded by 4 beautiful children and radiating the kind of contentment that came from being genuinely loved and valued. I think, Mrs. Peterson said slowly, we need to hear the truth about what really happened in your marriage. Derek looked trapped, realizing that all his lies were collapsing around him. Mom, this isn't the time or place. Actually, this is exactly the time and place, I said gently. Derek wanted me here to show everyone how pathetic his ex-wife had become. So let's show everyone exactly who we both really are. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years. Derek's family, our former friends, people who'd believed his story about the unstable ex-wife who'd ruined a good marriage. Derek told you all that our marriage ended because I was obsessed with having children and couldn't handle our fertility problems. But Derek knew I could have children easily because he'd seen my test results. Derek told you I became bitter and unstable. But Derek was the one who filed for divorce after starting a relationship with Jennifer while we were still married. Jennifer gasped. While you were still married? Derek asked for a separation, moved in with his brother, and started dating Jennifer while telling me he needed space to think about our marriage. He let me believe we might reconcile while he was already building a new relationship. Derek, Michael said, his voice full of disgust. You told us Naomi had left you. I never left Derek, I said quietly. I lived in our house alone for months, waiting for him to come home, while he was playing house with Jennifer and her children. The look on Derek's face told me he knew his reputation was destroyed. Every lie he'd told was being exposed in front of everyone who mattered to him. But here's what Derek didn't count on, I continued. Derek thought destroying my marriage would destroy me. He thought taking away my home, my financial security, and my sense of self-worth would leave me broken forever. I looked directly at Derek, the man who'd once made me believe I was worthless. Instead, losing Derek was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover who I really was underneath all the lies he'd made me believe about myself. Marcus chose that moment to walk into the country club, having finished parking the car. He was tall, handsome, successful, and clearly adored me and our children. He kissed me gently and took Michael from my arms. Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. Traffic was terrible. He looked around the silent room and smiled. I hope I didn't interrupt anything important. Just introducing our children to some old friends, I said, smiling up at my husband. Derek stared at Marcus, the successful, attractive, devoted husband who valued me in all the ways Derek never had. Derek, I said, looking at my ex-husband one final time. Thank you. Thank you. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you for showing me that I deserved better than settling for someone who saw me as broken. Thank you for forcing me to rebuild my life so I could discover how strong I really was. Thank you for leaving me so I could find someone who sees my worth. I looked around the room at all the people who'd believed Derek's lies about me. And thank you for inviting me to your baby shower so I could show everyone who I really became after you threw me away. Derek's reputation, his narrative, his entire identity as the reasonable man who'd escaped an unstable wife, was lying in pieces around his feet. Jennifer was staring at Derek with dawning horror, realizing she'd been manipulated just like I had been. Derek's family was looking at him with disgust and shame. His friends were understanding that they'd been supporting a man who'd psychologically abused his wife for years. Derek, Jennifer said quietly, I think we need to talk. As Marcus and I loaded our children back into their car seats, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Derek had spent so much energy trying to destroy me that he'd never realized he was actually freeing me to become someone extraordinary. How do you feel? Marcus asked as we drove away from the country club. I feel sorry for him, I said honestly. Derek spent so much time focused on keeping me small that he never worked on becoming someone worth keeping. He threw away a woman who would have loved him forever. And for what? So he could feel superior to someone for a few years. His loss, Marcus said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Though I have to admit, I'm grateful he was too stupid to appreciate what he had. Otherwise I never would have found you. I looked back at our 4 children sleeping peacefully in their car seats. Then at my husband who'd seen my strength when Derek had only seen my desperation. Derek had tried to write a story where I was the broken ex-wife who'd ruined a good marriage through my own inadequacies. But stories can be rewritten by people who refuse to accept someone else's narrative about their worth. In the end, Derek got exactly what he deserved, the consequences of his own cruelty. And I got exactly what I'd always deserved, a love built on truth, respect, and genuine partnership. As we drove home to our beautiful life, I realized Derek had been right about one thing. That baby shower had shown everyone exactly who we really were. It just wasn't the revelation Derek had been expecting. Sometimes the universe doesn't just give you justice, it gives you poetry. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your former abuser becomes irrelevant to your happiness. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever been discarded by someone who was supposed to love you, if you've ever been made to feel broken by someone else's cruelty, remember this. Their opinion of your worth says everything about them and nothing about you. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. And sometimes, walking away from someone who doesn't appreciate you is the first step toward finding someone who does. Make sure you hit that like button if you believe in the power of rebuilding your life after betrayal. And subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to let someone else's cruelty define their future. Because sometimes the best chapter of your life begins when someone else decides they don't want to be part of your story anymore. Derek thought he was ending my story when he filed those divorce papers. But he was actually just giving me permission to write a better one. And that, my friends, is the most beautiful kind of revenge there is.